Hello, my friend. Tonight we stand on Salisbury Plain in the darkness before dawn, where the grass is wet, the air is cold, and a crowd of silent people gathers around a stone so large it seems to belong to the earth itself. The stone lies in a shallow hollow, wrapped in ropes made from twisted plant fiber and rawhide. Its surface is pale gray, rough beneath the hands, damp with night mist. Around it, men and women wait with shoulders bent, their breath rising in small white clouds. Children stand farther back, half hidden behind their elders, watching the adults prepare for something that feels both practical and sacred. No one speaks loudly. The plain itself seems to listen. In the distance, the horizon is only a dark line. Beyond it, the sun is still hidden, but everyone here knows where it will rise. That knowledge matters. It has mattered for years, perhaps for generations, long enough for memory to become instruction, and instruction to become duty. The people gathered here have come not merely to move a stone. They have come to change the shape of the world. A signal passes through the crowd. Hands tighten. Feet press into the chalky soil. The ropes grow taut. For a moment, nothing happens. The stone remains still, heavy as winter, stubborn as a hill. A murmur moves among the workers. Someone adjusts a wooden lever. Someone else kneels beside the pit and clears a wedge of packed earth with a polished antler pick. The builders know the stone will not rise through strength alone. It must be persuaded. It must be balanced, tilted, braced, pulled, held, and trusted. Then it shifts, only a little, but enough. A low sound passes through the crowd, not quite a cheer, not quite a prayer. The great stone leans upward, dragging against timber supports. Mud squeezes from beneath it, ropes creak, muscles tremble. The whole plain seems to draw breath. If one line snaps, if one wedge slips, if one command is missed in the half-light, the stone may fall. It may crush a leg, break a chest, end a life, and still they pull. This is not a people without technology. That is the first quiet surprise. They have no iron cranes, no wheels turning on steel axles, no engines, no written diagrams preserved on parchment. Yet they possess another kind of technology, older and more intimate. They know wood, fiber, stone, slope, rhythm, weight, and human coordination. They know how many bodies can pull before a rope frays. They know how wet chalk behaves beneath pressure. They know the patience of repeated effort. The stone rises another hand span. A leader calls out, voice steady in the dim air. The sound is answered by movement, not words. One group pulls, another braces, others feed timbers beneath the stone's base, creating a slow path from lying to standing. The work is dangerous because everything is alive with force. The ropes strain like tendons. The levers bend like branches in a storm. The stone itself seems almost awake, resisting the people who dare to lift it from its sleep. And somewhere behind the workers, a fire burns low. Beside it, an older woman watches the horizon. Her face is lined, her cloak fastened with a bone pin, her hands wrapped against the cold. Perhaps she has seen other stones raised. Perhaps she remembers when this place was marked only by earth and timber. Perhaps she once helped carry food to the workers when she was young, while her own parents spoke of plans whose beginning lay beyond living memory. Now she watches a new generation complete what no single life can fully possess. That is part of the mystery. Stonehenge was never only an object. It was a long act of obedience to an idea. The builders stand within a landscape already touched by the dead. Beneath the grass are pits, ditches, post holes, bones, ashes, fragments of tools, and traces of fires gone cold long ago, not far away. Mounds rise softly from the plain like sleeping backs. Some hold human remains, some hold memory more than bodies. The land is not empty. It is layered. Every step may cross a forgotten path. Every ceremony may echo another. The stone now tilts higher. The danger increases. People at the rear pull harder, their heels digging trenches into the damp ground. People near the base guide the lower end toward the pit prepared for it. The pit has been shaped with care, wider on one side, sloped to receive the stone, deep enough to grip it once upright. Chalk rubble waits nearby, ready to be packed around the base. This is engineering, performed with earth, bone, wood, and touch. The first edge drops into the socket. A shock passes through the ropes. Several workers stumble. For one terrible instant, the stone sways. No one moves except those who must. A man at the side thrusts a timber brace into place. Another shouts for stones to be packed at the base. Hands rush forward, carrying chalk blocks, flint pieces, and broken stone. The crowd tightens around the danger, each person holding one small part of the larger will. The stone leans, pauses, and then, slowly, settles. It stands, not perfectly, not yet, but it stands. In the growing gray light, its height becomes clear. It towers over the people who raised it, their bodies, so necessary a moment ago, now seems small beneath the vertical mass. The stone casts no long shadow yet, because the sun has not arrived. It waits in darkness, newly upright, like a question planted in the earth. Why here? Why this shape? Why such effort? No written voice from the builders explains it. No carved inscription speaks from the stone. No king's name is cut into its face. Stonehenge gives us silence where other monuments give us boasts. It offers alignment instead of text, labor instead of proclamation, arrangement instead of confession. The absence is not empty. It is part of its power. The workers step back. Some are shaking from exhaustion. Some lower themselves to the ground. Some touch the standing stone as if greeting a living presence. Their palms leave dark marks on the damp surface. A child reaches out and is pulled back gently, not from fear alone, but from reverence. The stone has crossed a boundary. It was material. Now it is presence. At the edge of the gathering, someone begins a low chant. It may be a song of thanks, or a rhythm to steady the crowd, or a name for the morning. We cannot know the words, but we can imagine the human need behind them. When people survive danger together, they often make sound. They breathe meaning into the moment before it passes. Then the sun breaks. A thin line of gold appears beyond the plain, and the cold gray world begins to soften. The standing stone receives the first light along one edge. Moisture glimmers in its cracks. The ropes, the timber braces, the trampled grass, the tired faces, the open pit, the packed chalk, all are touched by dawn. For a while, the world seems still, but stillness can be deceptive. Around this single raised stone lies a design too vast for one morning. Other stones wait. Other journeys have already been made. Other hands have cut, dragged, lifted, and buried. Across years, the circle will change. Earth will be opened. Timber will rot. Stones will arrive from distant places. Generations will inherit tasks whose original dream may already be old. And in that slow dawn, on the wind-swept plain, the mystery begins to feel less like a puzzle of stones and more like a story of people. They are not giants. They are not magicians. They are human beings with hunger, fear, skill, memory, grief, and extraordinary patience. They work in cold weather. They bury their dead. They watch the sky. They follow leaders whose names are lost. They trust knowledge passed from hand to hand. And somehow, with no metal machinery and no written manual, they build a monument that will outlast their houses, their fields, their language, and almost everything they knew. The stone stands in the dawn. The people breathe. The plain keeps its silence. Across vast plains of pale chalk and wind-bent grass, the world of Stonehenge stretches far beyond the ring itself. It is not a lonely place in an empty wilderness. It belongs to a living landscape of ridges, rivers, paths, settlements, burial mounds, gathering places, and distant horizons. To understand its scale, imagine standing on Salisbury Plain in the late Neolithic Age, around 3000 B.C., with no modern towns, no church towers, no roads of asphalt, and no electric light. The sky is immense. The land breathes slowly beneath it. The plain rolls gently in every direction, opening into broad views where weather can be seen long before it arrives. Rain moves like a gray curtain across the distance. Sunlight travels over the grass in bright patches. At dawn, mist rests in the lower ground, and at dusk the hills darken one by one. The chalk beneath the soil drains water quickly, leaving open land easier to cross than thick forests or marshy valleys. This matters more than it first appears. A monument here could be seen, approached, remembered, and returned to. Yet this openness is surrounded by a much larger island world. To the south lies the coast, where seabirds cry over tidal flats and boats move along dangerous waters. To the west rise the hills and mountains of Wales, with hard stone, deep valleys, rain-dark slopes, and rivers that run toward the sea. To the north are long routes through changing country, past forests, uplands, and scattered communities. To the east, rivers lead toward other chalklands and distant shores facing continental Europe. The builders were not trapped in a small world. Their world was wide, connected, and full of movement. Rivers were the great pathways. The Avon, flowing not far from Stonehenge, wound through the landscape like a silver thread. It connected places by water and memory. Farther away, the Thames, Severn, Wye, and other river systems shaped travel, exchange, and imagination. People followed river valleys with animals, goods, stories, and news. A river could lead a family toward grazing land, guide a trader to a gathering place, or carry the memory of sacred stones from one region into another. Travel did not mean speed. Distance was felt in the body. A journey of many miles meant sore feet, weathered skin, careful planning, and trust in companions. A traveler might cross chalk downs, wooded ridges, wet meadows, and river crossings, sleeping beneath hides or in the shelter of another community. Every route had dangers. A swollen stream could block passage. Fog could confuse direction. Strangers could be generous, suspicious, or hostile. Still, people moved. They had always moved. And with movement came connection. Long before written maps, there were remembered landscapes. A person might know a line of hills by its shape at sunset, a spring by the taste of its water, a grove by the sound of wind in its branches. Tracks were not always permanent roads, but they could be ancient through use. Feet, hooves, sledges, and seasonal journeys pressed knowledge into the land. Some paths followed the easiest ground, others followed meaning. A route to a sacred place might be walked because ancestors had walked it, because stories clung to it, because a ceremony required arrival from a certain direction. The wider region around Stonehenge was already filled with monuments, long earthen banks, circular ditches, timber settings, burial places, and causewayed enclosures marked the land. Some were older than the great stone settings, some were active at the same time. Some were remembered only through their visible shapes and the stories told about them. This was a ceremonial landscape, not a single construction site. Stonehenge belonged to a conversation between places. Far away, other communities were also reshaping the island. In the Orkney Islands, off the northern coast of Scotland, people built impressive stone houses, tombs and circles. In Ireland, great passage tombs gathered winter sunlight deep inside chambers of stone. In western Britain, communities used tombs, mounds, and stone settings to bind the living with the dead. Across the Channel, on the European mainland, farmers, herders, traders, and monument builders were changing forests into fields and memory into architecture. The age of Stonehenge was not primitive stillness. It was a time of experiment. But the scale is not only geographical, it is social. The monument suggests gatherings large enough to feed workers, coordinate labor, prepare tools, and maintain purpose across seasons. People had to arrive from different settlements. They had to agree, or be persuaded, to contribute effort. They needed food stores, animals, timber, stone, rope, skins, water, and time away from ordinary tasks. A single family could not build such a thing. Even a small village would struggle. The work implies networks. Imagine the approach to Salisbury Plain during a season of gathering. Smoke rises from temporary camps. Dogs bark near pens of pigs and cattle. People arrive wearing skins, woven cloth, beads, bone pins, and ornaments of stone or shell. Some bring grain, some bring tools, some bring stories from distant valleys. Children stare at strangers whose speech sounds slightly different from their own. Elders exchange news beside cooking fires. Young people notice each other across the smoke. Beneath ceremony, ordinary life continues. Food is central. No great gathering survives on vision alone. Animals must be driven across country and slaughtered. Grain must be ground into meal. Water must be fetched. Fires must be tended. Meat roasts over flame. Fat dripping into ash. Clay or wooden vessels hold drink. Bones are cracked for marrow. The smell of cooked pork and cattle flesh spreads across the camp. Around the monument, human effort becomes social energy. Feasting makes labor possible, and labor gives feasting a reason. The plain itself becomes a stage. By day, workers cut chalk, haul timber, dig pits, shape stones, or repair earthworks. By evening, the same landscape changes. Fires bloom in the dark. Voices soften. Songs move through the camp. Somewhere, a child sleeps under a cloak while adults speak of ancestors, sky signs, births, deaths, bargains, and obligations. The monument grows not only through engineering, but through shared time. A people who build together also remember together. The distances involved deepen the mystery. Some stones used at Stonehenge were local in a broad regional sense. drawn from the sarsen fields of the Marlborough Downs, many miles away. Others, the famous bluestones, came from much farther west, from the Preseli Hills in Wales, whether carried by human hands over long routes, moved partly by water, or selected because of older sacred meanings. Their presence on Salisbury Plain reveals a world of astonishing reach. People knew places beyond their daily horizon. They valued materials not simply for convenience, but for origin. The island was not divided by hard borders in the modern sense. There were no nations called England, Wales, or Scotland. There were communities, kin groups, territories, seasonal ranges, and places of identity. A valley might belong to memory, a hill might belong to ritual. A river crossing might be controlled by agreement or custom. The boundaries of the world were felt through relationships, not lines on a map, and yet the people of this age could imagine scale. They watched the sun travel across the year. They knew the moon changed and returned. They understood herds moving between grazing grounds. They understood that a stone from far away carried more than weight. It carried distance made visible. To place such stones in a circle was to gather landscapes into one place. This is why Stonehenge feels larger than its measurements. Its outer form can be counted in meters. Its stones can be weighed. Its ditches can be surveyed. But its true size lies in the roots that fed it, the hands that touched it, the rivers that connected it, and the sky that framed it. It gathered the vastness of ancient Britain into a single ceremonial center on a wind-open plain, at night, under stars bright enough to cast faint shadows. The monument would have seemed to stand at the meeting point of earth and heaven. Around it lay chalkland, forest, river, sea, mountain, and memory. Beyond the darkness were communities who knew of this place, even if they saw it rarely. Some may have spoken its name with reverence. Some may have feared it. Some may have traveled toward it for healing, mourning, alliance, or obligation. The circle was local. The meaning was wider, across that immense Neolithic world, where every journey was earned by foot and every distant stone carried a story. Stonehenge became more than a monument. It became a center where many horizons came together, quietly, patiently, beneath the slow movement of the sun. Who were they? The question rises naturally from the stones, as if the monument itself were asking it back to us. The builders left no written names, no royal lists, no carved portraits, no tablets explaining their motives. They did not sign their work. They did not leave a sentence saying, "This is why we raised these stones beneath the sky." Their silence is profound. And because of that silence, every ditch, bone, tool mark, burial, and alignment becomes part of the answer. They were ancient people of Britain, living in the late Neolithic world, thousands of years before Rome, before written English, before the pyramids of classical Greece, before iron swords shone in the hands of warriors. They were farmers, herders, hunters, makers, travelers, mourners, and ritual specialists. They lived in timber houses, cooked over fires, shaped flint with skill, raised animals, grew crops, and watched the heavens with a patience that modern life often forgets. Yet even these words are only a beginning. They were not one simple tribe gathered around one simple idea. The monument suggests a society made from many communities, drawn into cooperation by belief, obligation, ancestry, power, or hope. Some may have lived near the plain, others may have come from far away, bringing animals, stones, stories, and customs. Their languages are gone. Their songs are gone. Their names for the sun, the dead, and the sacred are gone. Still, their actions remain. Where did they come from? Part of the answer lies deep in the movement of people across Europe. Farming had spread into Britain long before the largest stones were raised. New ways of life arrived with crops, domesticated animals, pottery, polished stone axes, and ideas about land and ancestry. These changes did not happen in a single instant. They unfolded through migration, exchange, marriage, learning, and sometimes replacement. The old hunter-gatherer world did not vanish like mist in sunlight. It changed unevenly, region by region, life by life. Imagine a family moving through a changing land. They carry grain in woven containers and led animals through clearings. They know how to plant seed, but still gather wild fruits. They keep cattle, but still read animal tracks in mud. They honor the dead in ways shaped by memory, older than farming itself. In such lives, old and new meet quietly. The world of Stonehenge grew from this blending, from the tension between movement and settlement, between inherited knowledge and fresh possibility. How did they rise? There was no empire in the modern sense. No army of uniformed soldiers marched across Britain under one flag. No palace bureaucracy stamped orders in clay. Their rise was subtler and perhaps more fascinating. It came through the ability to organize labor, concentrate meaning, and command devotion without the tools of later states. A community that could bring people together for construction, ceremony, feasting, and burial had already discovered a form of power. Power can live in a person, but it can also live in a place. Stonehenge may have risen because the plain became a location where different forms of authority overlapped. There was the authority of ancestors, whose remains and memories anchored the living. There was the authority of the sky, whose cycles gave structure to seasons and ceremonies. There was the authority of skilled knowledge, held by those who understood stones, alignments, rites, and the management of crowds. There was also the authority of shared labor. People who gave time and strength to a place became bound to it. This raises another question, one that cannot be answered by stone alone. Did people come willingly? Were they inspired by faith, obliged by kinship, directed by leaders, or pressured by custom? Perhaps all of these were true at once. Human societies rarely move under one cause. A young man may pull a rope because his family expects it. An elder may come because her ancestors are honored there. A leader may command because the ceremony strengthens his standing. A healer may seek power in the stones. A child may remember only the fires and voices. Why did their world change? The age that built Stonehenge was not still. Its people lived through transformations in settlement, ritual, technology, and contact. Farming changed how communities used land. Animal herding changed movement and wealth. Pottery and polished stone tools changed storage, food preparation, and work. Long-distance exchange brought objects and ideas from far beyond one valley. The dead were treated in changing ways, sometimes gathered into tombs, sometimes cremated, sometimes marked by mounds, stones, or timber. The sacred landscape evolved because society evolved. Change also came from the sky and seasons. A bad year could mean hunger. A wet season could rot grain. Disease might move through animals or people. Conflict could flare over grazing, prestige, or access to sacred places. Even without written chronicles, pressure leaves traces. Monuments are often built not only when societies are comfortable, but when they need to create order, memory, and unity. Stonehenge may be a monument of confidence. It may also be a monument built against uncertainty. This is one of its quiet revelations. A circle of stone can look permanent, but it may arise from a world that feels fragile. What did they leave behind? They left more than a ring of standing stones. They left an archaeological landscape of astonishing depth. Ditches and banks show planning and boundary making. Post holes reveal vanished timber structures. Cremated remains tell of the dead brought close to the sacred center. Animal bones speak of feasting. Tools made from antler, bone, and stone show the physical labor of shaping earth. Wear marks, broken fragments, and buried deposits give small glimpses of decisions made by hands long gone. They also left absence. No ordinary village sits directly inside the circle, explaining everything. No clear temple text names the gods. No single burial identifies the supreme ruler who ordered the work. Instead, the evidence is scattered, partial, and patient. We must read it like a night sky, connecting points of light while remembering that darkness remains between them. To ask who they were is to accept that the answer must be layered. They were practical and symbolic. They were local and connected. They were ancient and inventive. They lived close to animals, weather, soil, and death. They could be tender with the remains of their people and ruthless with their own bodies in labor. They understood materials through direct experience, not abstract calculation written on paper. They knew that a monument could outlast flesh, and perhaps they knew something else. They knew that memory needs form. A story told by firelight may vanish when the last listener dies. A wooden post may rot, a track may fade under grass. But a stone, raised with immense effort and placed in relation to sky and earth, can hold attention across time. It can make future people stop, look, and wonder. It can turn effort into presence. It can make the dead feel near and the heavens feel measured. The builders could not have imagined the modern world looking back at them. They could not have imagined aircraft passing above the plain, archaeologists mapping buried features, visitors arriving from across the planet, or scholars debating their intentions in languages not yet born. Yet they succeeded in one extraordinary way. They made a place that still asks questions. Who were they? They were the people who turned uncertainty into architecture. Where did they come from? They came from generations shaped by migration, farming, landscape, and memory. How did they rise? They rose through cooperation, belief, skill, and the power of gathering. Why did their world change? Because every human world changes, even when it builds in stone. What did they leave behind? They left a circle, a silence, and one of the most enduring invitations in human history. To understand the first roots of Stonehenge, we must go back into a Britain that looked, sounded, and even smelled different from the familiar countryside of today. The land was still carrying memories of ice, not memories in words, but in soil, valley, river, stone, and climate. Long before the monument rose from Salisbury Plain, glaciers had pressed upon the northern parts of the island, grinding mountains, shaping valleys, and leaving behind a changed world as they retreated. The South was not buried beneath the last great ice in the same way, yet it lived under its influence. Cold winds, open ground, roaming animals, and shifting seasons gave way slowly to warmth. When the climate softened, the land answered with life. Birch and pine spread first, followed by hazel, oak, elm, and lime. Forests thickened, rivers swelled with meltwater and rain. Marshes formed in low places. Animals moved through the new green world, some familiar, some now vanished from Britain. Deer browsed in clearings, wild cattle pushed through woodland, boar rooted in soft earth, wolves followed trails of scent beneath the trees. For humans, this was not scenery. It was home, larder, danger, and map. The earliest people of this changing landscape were hunters, gatherers, fishers, and foragers. They moved with the seasons, following animals, plants, fish runs, nuts, berries, and useful stone. Their camps were light compared with later settlements, but their knowledge was deep. They knew which trees burned hot, which plants healed wounds, which riverbanks gave flint, and which tracks belonged to prey. Their world was not poor because it lacked fields. It was rich in signs. Every broken twig, every bird call, every change in wind could matter. But Britain itself was changing shape. For a time the island was not fully an island. To the east and southeast, lowlands connected Britain with the European continent. People, animals, and plants could move across regions now hidden beneath the North Sea. As waters rose after the Ice Age, this connection slowly drowned. Valleys became estuaries. Hunting grounds became seabed. Familiar routes disappeared beneath waves. The making of Britain as an island was not a single day of disaster, but a long transformation, one that changed how people understood distance, movement, and belonging. Imagine a shoreline creeping inland across generations. A grandfather remembers walking where his grandchildren see water. A group returns to an old crossing and finds marsh. A path once used for hunting becomes dangerous, then impossible. Such changes do not merely alter travel, they alter memory. They teach people that land can vanish, that the world itself is alive, that places may be lost even when stories remain. In such a world, fixing meaning in earth and stone may have carried a special power. Salisbury Plain belonged to this wider transformation, but it had its own character. The chalk beneath it was ancient, formed from the remains of tiny sea creatures laid down in a far older ocean over immense spans of time. That seabed became high ground. Rain filtered through the chalk, leaving the surface comparatively dry. Thin soils formed over pale bedrock. Trees grew, but the chalk downs could open more easily than heavier clay landscapes. Clearings made by grazing animals, storms, fire, and human work created spaces where sky and land met in broad visibility. This openness mattered. A person standing on chalk upland could see weather, birds, smoke, and movement at a distance. Paths were easier to remember when ridge lines guided the eye. Springs emerging at the edges of chalk country became important places, where underground water returned to light. Flint nodules embedded in chalk provided sharp material for tools. The land gave both vision and utility. It invited movement across its back, and in time it invited gathering. Before farming, people had already learned the plain through repeated use. They may have hunted there, gathered materials there, crossed it between river valleys, or paused near springs and seasonal resources. Their presence was light compared with later monuments, but not meaningless. A place can become important long before it is built upon. It can gather memory through paths, successful hunts, burials, meetings, fears, and stories told again under changing skies. Then came farming. The arrival of agriculture in Britain changed the relationship between people and land. Crops required cleared spaces, preparation, tending, and expectation. Animals such as cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs created new rhythms of care and movement. A planted field asked people to return. A herd became wealth that walked, breathed, bred, and sometimes sickened. Forests were cut or burned. Clearings widened. The soundscape changed from the calls of wild animals and hunters to include the lowing of cattle, the grunting of pigs, the chop of stone axes, and the voices of people working soil. Yet farming was not simply an improvement laid upon emptiness. It brought risk. Crops could fail. Stored food could rot. Animals could die. Communities became more tied to particular territories, and with that attachment came new tensions. Land that had once been crossed seasonally could become claimed, watched, defended, inherited, or remembered through the dead. The soil began to hold not only seed, but identity. The environment shaped the people in quiet ways. Chalkland encouraged certain kinds of movement and visibility. Rivers offered routes and boundaries. Forests provided materials, but also enclosed the eye. Open downland exposed people to weather, but allowed gatherings on a grand scale. The sky felt close because so much of it could be seen. Sunrises and sunsets were not brief glimpses between trees. They were events unfolding across the horizon. The moon moved over open ground with solemn clarity. Stars filled the night with slow patterns. A society living under such skies would not need written astronomy to notice repetition. The longest days came and went. The shortest days returned. Certain points on the horizon mattered because light appeared there at meaningful times. Shadows changed. Animals bred in seasons. Plants answered warmth and rain. Human ceremonies could attach themselves to these cycles, not as abstract science, but as lived experience. The year was not a calendar on a wall. It was hunger, birth, death, labor, and hope moving in a circle. The old landscape also shaped ideas about the dead. In a world where ancestors had cleared land, tended animals, remembered lost routes, and endured seasons, the dead were not easily separated from place. Bones, ashes, tombs, and burial grounds could anchor memory. A mound might say, "Our people were here." A ditch might mark separation between ordinary ground and charged ground. A stone might hold permanence in a world where bodies decayed, timber rotted, and coastlines moved. So the origins of Stonehenge do not begin with a stone being dragged across open land. They begin with climate warming after ice, forests rising, seas covering old pathways, hunters reading the land, farmers clearing it, and communities learning to bind identity to place. They begin with chalk beneath bare feet, flint in skilled hands, cattle moving through morning mist, and people watching the horizon with care. The monument grew from a world already full of meaning, not a blank world, not a simple world, a living world of change, memory, risk, and return, where the land itself taught human beings that nothing lasts unless it is held, repeated, and made visible beneath the sky. Far from the great stones and ceremonial gatherings, life begins in smaller sounds. A fire catches in the morning. A child coughs beneath a hide covering. A woman lifts a grinding stone and begins the slow work of turning grain into meal. Outside, cattle shift in the damp air, their bodies dark against the pale light. Dogs nose through ash and scraps. Smoke rises from a roof of timber, thatch, and woven branches plastered with clay. This is the human world behind the monument. The people who shaped Salisbury Plain were not always builders. Most days they were farmers, herders, parents, makers, cooks, watchers, and sleepers. Their lives were measured by the needs of bodies and seasons. Food had to be grown, gathered, stored, cooked, and shared. Animals had to be guarded from disease, wolves, theft, and wandering. Tools had to be repaired. Hides had to be scraped. Children had to be kept warm. A roof had to hold through rain. In a small settlement, the morning might begin before full daylight. Someone checks the animals, someone tends the hearth, coaxing flame from embers preserved through the night. Someone carries water in a vessel made from pottery, wood, skin, or woven fiber sealed with pitch. The ground is cold beneath bare or roughly wrapped feet. The air smells of smoke, dung, damp wool, crushed plants, and cooked grain. Nothing is wasted if it can still serve a use. Food is work before it is comfort. Grain must be harvested with flint-edged tools, dried, stored away from damp and pests, then ground by hand. The movement is repetitive and heavy. Stone against stone, back and forth, day after day. The flour is coarse. It carries grit from the quern, slowly wearing human teeth. Bread or porridge may be mixed with water, milk, fat, or gathered plants. Meat is valued, but not always daily. Milk, cheese, and blood may matter as much as slaughter. Animals live close to people. Cattle are wealth, labor, food, and living prestige. Their hides become coverings. Their bones become tools. Their movement shapes paths and grazing rights. Pigs forage near woodland edges, finding acorns and roots. Sheep and goats provide meat, milk, skins, and fiber. Dogs guard, hunt, warn, and scavenge. Children grow up understanding animals not as distant creatures, but as companions in survival, unpredictable and necessary. Inside a house, space is intimate. Smoke darkens rafters. Baskets hang above the floor. Tools rest near sleeping places. A polished stone axe may be treasured and protected, not only as a tool, but as an object of status and memory. Flint blades are sharp and small, made by hands trained to strike stone at just the right angle. Bone needles, antler picks, wooden bowls, clay pots, woven mats, and cords made from plant fiber form a quiet inventory of skill. There is beauty here, too. A pot is not only a container. Its surface may be pressed with cord, fingertip, bone, or carved tool, leaving patterns that catch light when the clay is fired. A bead may travel many miles before resting at someone's throat. A cloak pin may be shaped with care beyond strict necessity. Hair may be bound, bodies painted, garments decorated, and tools smoothed until they feel pleasing in the hand. Human beings rarely live by function alone. Even in hard lives, they make meaning visible. Work is divided, but not always in ways that can be easily seen from the ground traces left behind. Some people specialize in certain skills because they are gifted, trained, inherited into a role, or trusted by others. One person may know the best clay beds. Another may shape flint with unusual precision. Another may understand healing plants. Another may remember genealogies, boundaries, and ceremonial obligations. Knowledge lives in bodies before it lives in books. Children learn by watching. A little girl crouches beside an elder, copying the twist of fiber into cord. A boy follows older youths toward the grazing animals, learning how to read mood in a cow's posture. A child too small for heavy labor gathers sticks, carries kindling, scares birds from grain, or holds a baby sibling. Play and training overlap. A toy bow, a miniature pot, a small bundle of reeds tied into shape, all prepare the young for an adult world that will demand much from them. Illness is never far away. A cut can sour, a tooth can break and poison the jaw. Childbirth is dangerous. Winter weakens the old. Smoke damages lungs. Hunger follows a poor harvest. A limping animal can threaten food plans. In such a world, healing is both practical and spiritual. Herbs, splints, warmth, massage, ritual words, charms, and care from kin may all be used together. The boundary between medicine and belief is not a wall. It is a woven thing. Death enters the household not as an abstraction, but as a familiar visitor. A baby may not survive. A strong adult may fall to injury. An elder may fade through a cold season. Mourning has tasks. The body must be treated according to custom. Some dead may be buried, some may be placed in tombs, some may be cremated, their bones gathered from ash with care. The dead do not simply disappear. They remain in memory, in place, in objects, and in obligations. Ritual may begin at the hearth. A portion of food offered to fire, a spoken name, a gesture before travel, a charm placed with a tool, a vessel broken deliberately, not because it failed, but because breaking can be part of meaning. The sacred is not confined to monuments. It moves through thresholds, bodies, animals, seasons, and the buried remains of kin. Ordinary life is not separate from mystery. It is where mystery is first learned. Trade and exchange add distant colors to this local world. A finely made axe from a far source may pass between communities through gift, marriage, alliance, debt, or ceremony. Shells may arrive from coasts. Unusual stones may carry stories of places never seen by the person who wears them. Goods move, but so do songs, techniques, warnings, marriages, and rumors. Every exchanged object is also a thread between people. At night, the settlement contracts around firelight. Outside the glow, the dark belongs to animals, spirits, weather, and imagination. People speak quietly. Stories move from elder to child. Some stories explain the origin of a hill, a river, a stone, or a family. Others warn against arrogance, betrayal, hunger, or wandering too far alone. Above the roof, smoke. The stars turn slowly. The same sky watched by travelers and builders is also watched by a tired mother, a sleepless elder, and a child who does not yet know what kind of world will be inherited. This is where the strength of a monument truly begins. Not in a single command, not in a sudden miracle. It begins in hands hardened by grinding grain, backs trained by carrying water, eyes sharpened by watching seasons, and memories strengthened by stories told again and again. The people who could raise stones were first people who knew how to endure. Their great achievement grew out of daily patience, shared hunger, skilled touch, family duty, and the quiet belief that life and death were bound to land. Before stone became monument, life itself was the training. Authority in the world of Stonehenge did not need a crown of gold to be real. It did not need a palace wall, a written decree, or a carved throne. It could gather quietly around a hearth, at the edge of a burial mound, beside a timber post, or in the voice of someone who remembered what others had forgotten. Power began where people accepted that certain hands, certain words, and certain places carried unusual weight. At first glance, such a society may seem leaderless because it left no king's inscription behind. But absence of writing is not absence of order. Large tasks require decisions. Food must be collected. Workers must be summoned. Disputes must be settled. Ceremonies must be timed. Materials must be chosen. A gathering of many families cannot simply happen without structure. Someone must decide when to begin, where to stand, which animals to slaughter, and which acts must never be done casually. Some authority may have belonged to elders. Age carried memory, and memory was power. An elder could recall marriages, debts, rights to grazing, stories of ancestors, and the proper way to treat the dead. In a world without written records, such knowledge gave shape to society. A person who remembered the past could guide the living. They could say which path was old, which agreement was binding, which family owed service, and which place was forbidden. Other authority may have belonged to ritual specialists. These were people who understood the movement of seasons, the handling of bones, the setting of fires, the meaning of offerings, and the proper words spoken when ordinary ground became sacred. They may not have been priests in the later temple sense, but they held knowledge that separated them from others. They knew how to approach danger without angering unseen powers. They knew when silence mattered. They knew how grief could be shaped into ceremony. There were also skilled planners. A monument cannot be raised on belief alone. It needs measurement, memory, and coordination. The people who set out ditches, aligned posts, organized digging, or chose the angle of a stone possessed practical authority. Their knowledge may have been learned through apprenticeship, observation, and repeated experiment. A mistake in a house could be repaired. A mistake in a great sacred structure might shame a community or threaten a right. Precision became a form of leadership. Warrior authority may have existed too, though not always in the image of armies and conquest. A strong person with allies, courage, and success in conflict could command attention. Raiding, protection, revenge, and defense all create leaders. A man or woman who could gather fighters, guard herds, negotiate danger, or face a hostile group might gain prestige that carried into peacetime. In such a world, physical strength, bravery, and generosity could build reputation. But power was not only personal, it lived in ceremonies that made people feel part of something larger than a household. A feast could turn food into obligation. When families arrived with animals and grain, when meat was shared in public, when leaders gave generously, social bonds were renewed. Those who received food might owe loyalty. Those who provided it displayed wealth. Those who controlled the timing of the feast controlled the rhythm of gathering. Around the fires, hierarchy could be tasted in the meat. Taxes may not have existed in the written bureaucratic sense, but contributions certainly did. Labor itself could be demanded through custom. One family brings cattle, another brings timber, another sends young adults to dig, another prepares rope, another carries water. What later states might record as taxation could exist here as expectation. Debt, honor, pressure, and sacred duty. Refusing to contribute may not only anger leaders, it may endanger one's place among kin and ancestors. Fortifications in this age were not always castles. Some enclosures were made with ditches and banks, often with interrupted entrances that guided movement. Causewayed enclosures, earthworks, and palisaded places created boundaries between inside and outside. Their purpose could be practical, ritual, social, or all at once. A ditch may keep animals in or people out. It may also mark separation between everyday life and a charged ceremonial zone. Earth itself became architecture. Timber was another language of power. Before stone dominated the imagination, wooden posts rose in circles, lines, and settings across sacred landscapes. A large post had to be selected, cut, shaped, moved, and planted upright. It would stand for years, darkening with rain, cracking in sun, perhaps decorated, perhaps touched during ceremony. Unlike stone, timber changes visibly. It rots, leans, and returns to earth. That slow decay may have held meaning, reminding people that some sacred forms were meant to live and die. Administration in such a society was carried by memory, habit, and personal trust. There were no ledgers, as far as we know, but there were keepers of sequence. Someone knew which clan had arrived. Someone remembered who had given animals last season. Someone counted days by moon, sun, or recurring signs in the landscape. Someone tracked the progress of work. Order can exist without ink. It can live in repeated performance until people no longer ask why it must be done that way. The rise of authority also changed ordinary relationships. A person with ritual knowledge might marry into an influential family. A skilled builder might travel from one gathering place to another, carrying prestige. A generous household might become central because it could feed others. A lineage that claimed special connection to the dead might gain the right to speak first. Power grew from many roots, and because it grew slowly, it could feel natural to those living under it. Yet, beneath this surface of order, tension always waited. When people gather, they also compare. Who brought the largest animal? Who received the best portion? Who stood closest to the sacred center? Who was allowed to touch the bones? Who gave commands? And who obeyed? A monument can unite a people, but it can also display inequality. The same ceremony that binds communities together may remind everyone of rank. Calm rituals can contain quiet rivalries. Leadership in this world was therefore delicate. A leader could not rule through distant paperwork or permanent armies. Authority had to be renewed through success, persuasion, generosity, sacred legitimacy, and practical competence. If the crops failed, if the ceremony went wrong, if a stone fell, if a feast was poorly managed, prestige could weaken. Power had to be performed in front of watching eyes. This makes the organization behind Stonehenge even more remarkable. It suggests not only strength, but endurance. Plans had to survive disagreement. Knowledge had to move across generations. Sacred boundaries had to remain meaningful, even as individuals died. Work had to be divided without modern institutions. The people involved created durable order from custom, memory, and belief. At the center of this order stood places that drew people inward. A ditch cut into chalk, a bank gleaming pale in the sun, a timber setting rising above the grass, a burial ground holding the burned remains of the dead. These were not silent features to those who used them. They instructed movement, they shaped emotion, they told visitors where to pause, where to enter, where to look, and perhaps where not to go. Power, then, did not begin with a throne. It began with the ability to gather bodies, direct labor, feed crowds, guard memory, and make a landscape feel sacred. It began when people accepted that some places mattered more than others, and that certain acts performed there could bind the living to the dead, the earth to the sky, and one community to another. On Salisbury Plain, authority became visible not as a ruler's face, but as organized space, a line dug in chalk, a post set upright, a circle imagined before it was complete, a crowd moving together because they believed the work mattered. That belief was the first great machinery. No name survives for the person who first held the whole design clearly in the mind. Perhaps there was no single person. Perhaps the vision belonged to a lineage, a council, a group of ritual specialists, or a chain of builders who each added something to an inherited plan. Yet in every great human work, there is often a moment when an idea becomes sharper than custom. Someone looks at the land and sees not only what is there, but what could be made to stand there. Imagine such a figure moving across the plain in the pale light of morning. Not a king in the later sense, not a crowned ruler surrounded by soldiers. More likely, a person known by reputation, by memory, by skill, by the confidence others placed in difficult judgment. Their cloak is dark with mist. Their hair is bound back from the face. Their hands are marked by labor, not softness. They carry no written plan, but they carry distances, angles, ceremonies, and obligations inside the mind. This person knows that power over stone begins long before stone is touched. It begins with seeing. They watch the horizon through the seasons. They know where the sun rises when the days are longest, and where it sets when the cold season reaches its deepest point. They stand in the same place again and again, perhaps with companions, perhaps alone, measuring with the body, a heel pressed into chalk, a line of sight over a distant ridge, a wooden stake placed and checked, a memory corrected by another watcher. The sky is slow, but it is not vague. Such knowledge brings danger. When a person claims to understand patterns larger than ordinary life, others may listen with awe, suspicion, or envy. A failed prediction can wound authority. A mistimed ceremony can bring shame. A burial performed incorrectly may trouble the living. The visionary must not only know, but be seen to know. Every act becomes a test. Perhaps this person was born into a family already tied to sacred work. As a child, they may have followed elders along processional paths, carrying small bundles, listening to rules they were too young to understand. They may have watched bones lifted from ash, stones washed before rites, animals selected for feasts, and fires lit at chosen moments. The child would learn that some knowledge is spoken aloud, while other knowledge is shown only by gesture. Or perhaps the figure came from outside the plain, bringing prestige from a distant region. A traveler who had seen stone settings in another land might carry new possibilities. A builder who understood how timber circles could organize crowds might imagine permanence in heavier material. A ritual specialist who knew of sacred stones in western hills might argue that distant power could be gathered into this open chalkland. Innovation often arrives disguised as memory. This person would need patience more than command. To persuade a community to work for a day is one thing. To persuade many communities to labor across seasons is another. They would speak at feasts, beside graves, near cattle pens, at river crossings, in the half-light after ceremony. They would remind families of ancestors. They would speak of return, alignment, healing, obligation, and honor. They would turn effort into duty by giving it meaning. But persuasion also requires listening. The vision could not survive if it ignored everyone else. The owners of herds must be convinced to feed workers. Skilled flint knappers must prepare tools. Woodcutters must select timber. Those who know distant routes must advise on transport. Families with ancestral claims must be respected. If sacred ground is to be reshaped, old rites and memories must be carefully handled. A monument is not only built from materials, it is built from consent, rivalry, fear, and trust. There may have been a moment of exile in the story, though no record preserves it. Many great plans meet resistance. Some may have said the work was too dangerous. Others may have feared angering the dead. Some may have questioned why labor should be spent on stones when fields needed tending and animals needed guarding. A leader who pushes too hard can be rejected. A visionary must learn the boundary between ambition and offense. Imagine this person leaving a gathering in silence after elders refuse a proposal. The evening is cold, fires burn behind them. Laughter and argument fade into the dark. Above the plain, stars appear one by one. The rejected plan does not disappear. It becomes heavier. In that loneliness, the future of a monument may rest not on force, but on endurance. The idea must survive humiliation. Then, gradually, support gathers. A respected elder agrees that the place has power. A family offers animals for a feast. A skilled builder says the plan is difficult but possible. A group of young workers, eager for reputation, volunteers for the first labor. A ritual specialist declares that the signs are favorable. The idea, once fragile, begins to move through the community like fire, catching in dry grass. People repeat it. They alter it. They claim they believed it from the beginning. The visionary's role changes. They are no longer only the keeper of an idea, they become its servant. Every detail demands attention. Where should the entrance face? How wide should the ditch be? Which ground must remain untouched? Which dead may be placed within the sacred boundary? Where should workers camp? How should food be distributed? What must be done when tools break? When weather turns? When tempers rise? Their authority depends on calm in moments of strain. When a ditch collapses after rain, they must steady the workers. When two families dispute a place of honor, they must offer a solution that preserves dignity. When a body is brought for burial, they must shift from planning to mourning. When young men boast too loudly near sacred ground, they must quiet them without shaming their families. Leadership is often the art of preventing small fractures from becoming permanent breaks. The visionary may not have thought of themselves as an inventor. In their own mind, they may have been restoring an older order, obeying ancestors, fulfilling a command from dreams, or making visible a pattern already present in earth and sky. Many builders of sacred places do not say, "I create." They say, I reveal. They say, this was always waiting. One evening, as the sun lowers and the plain becomes bronze, the figure stands where the circle is imagined. Nothing grand may yet rise there. Perhaps there are only stakes, pits, chalk marks, and trampled grass. But in the mind, the completed form already exists. Upright stones, open spaces, a path of approach, light entering at the appointed season, people walking in silence, ashes of the dead resting nearby, the sky framed by human intention. For a moment, the world holds two realities at once. There is the empty ground beneath the feet, and there is the monument not yet born. The unnamed visionary stands between them, carrying a future too heavy for one life and too powerful to remain only a thought. Around them, the plain darkens. Fires appear in the distance. Voices drift over the grass. Somewhere, a child laughs. Somewhere, an elder coughs beside a hearth. Ordinary life continues, unaware that an idea has begun to harden into destiny. No face remains, no name remains, but the human act remains unmistakable. Someone, or some small group of people, dared to imagine that earth, stone, sky, death, and community could be joined into one enduring form. They did not need a written blueprint to dream its scale. They needed memory, confidence, sacred authority, and the patience to persuade others that the impossible was not impossible at all. The first great victory at Stonehenge was not the raising of the tallest stones. It was the moment the land itself was cut open and given a new boundary. Before stone towers changed the skyline, before lintels rested above human heads, the builders made a circle from earth, chalk, timber, and intention. They took the plain, which seemed endless, and marked one part of it as different. The work began with digging. Antler picks bit into the chalk. Shoulder blades of cattle may have served as shovels. Baskets carried loosened earth from the trench. Hands became white with chalk dust. Knees pressed into damp ground. The ditch was not dug by machine, but by repeated blows, patient scraping, and the rhythm of bodies working side by side. Each strike removed only a little. Yet little by little the circle appeared. This was a victory over scale. A single person sees only the curve near their feet. A worker inside the trench cannot see the entire form. The full circle exists first in agreement and memory, then slowly in the ground. Those guiding the work must keep the line true across distance. Stakes may be set. Sight lines may be checked. Corrections may be made quietly before errors grow too large. The circle is not merely a shape. It is discipline made visible. The chalk taken from the ditch is piled into a bank. Freshly exposed, it shines pale against grass and soil. From a distance, the earthwork would have gleamed in the light, a white ring on the open plain. It did not need towering stones to impress the eye. The contrast alone would have transformed the place. What had once been ordinary ground now possessed a visible edge, a threshold, a sense of inside and outside. And with a boundary comes a question. Who may enter? Who must remain beyond? The earliest Stonehenge was not only a construction project, it was a controlled space. The ditch, bank, and entrances guided human movement. People approaching the ring would not simply wander in from any direction without meaning. Their bodies would be directed by earth. Their steps would slow. Their voices might lower. The boundary taught behavior before any words were spoken. Near and within this early monument, pits were dug. Some held cremated human remains, carefully gathered after fire had done its work. This is one of the deepest clues to the first purpose of the place. The dead were not kept far away in neglect. They were brought into the sacred design. Ash and bone, whitened by heat, were placed in the ground with care. The circle was therefore connected to memory, mourning, and perhaps the transformation of the body into another state. Cremation itself is a powerful act. A body that once spoke, walked, labored, embraced, and suffered is given to flame. The fire changes flesh to smoke, heat, ash, and fragments of bone. Those who stand nearby must watch a human form become something else. Afterward, the remains are collected, sometimes with great attention. This gathering of fragments is intimate. It requires recognition even after destruction. It says that what remains still matters. At Stonehenge, the dead may have been ancestors of importance, members of selected families, ritual figures, or individuals whose identity gave the place strength. We cannot know each name, but the pattern suggests intention. The monument was not a casual burial ground for everyone. It may have been a place where certain dead were gathered to anchor the living community. To bury remains within such a circle was to place human memory inside cosmic order. Timber also rose in this early sacred landscape. Wooden posts may have marked points, held structures, framed movement, or carried meanings now lost. Timber is alive in a way stone is not. It once grew from seed. It has rings hidden inside, recording years of rain and sun. When cut and planted upright, a post becomes both tree and marker, both life taken and form remade. Its presence would change with weather and time. Rain darkens it, sun cracks it, lichen finds it. Eventually, it decays. That decay may have mattered. A wooden setting could express the world of the living, changing and temporary, while burial and earthwork held the memory of the dead, or perhaps timber represented something entirely different. A path, a house of spirits, a fence between powers. The evidence cannot speak in full sentences, yet the combination of ditch, bank, cremation, and post suggests a place where people were building with more than material need. They were shaping relationships between bodies, land, and unseen forces. The first major victory was therefore a victory of coordination, but also of belief. People had to accept that digging the circle mattered. They had to leave ordinary tasks and commit strength to a work whose purpose was larger than immediate survival. They had to feed the diggers, sharpen tools, replace broken picks, settle disputes, and keep the plan alive through fatigue. The monument's first form was made from human attention as much as from chalk. Picture the ring in its early state. The bank is bright, the ditch is fresh, entrances open through the earthwork. Timber posts stand nearby or within the design. Smoke rises from fires used in ceremony and cooking. People gather at chosen moments. Some arrive grieving, some arrive curious, some arrive proud that their labor has helped shape the place. Children see the white bank and understand that this ground is not like other ground. The ceremony may be quiet. A group moves toward the entrance carrying a bundle wrapped in hide or woven fiber. Inside are the burned remains of a person known to those present, perhaps an elder, perhaps a ritual leader, perhaps someone whose lineage binds several communities together. The procession pauses, words are spoken, ash is lowered into a pit. A few objects may be placed with it, or perhaps nothing at all. because the body itself is the offering. Earth closes over bone. No trumpet sounds, no written record is made. Yet the act changes the place. With each burial, the circle gathers presence. With each ceremony, the boundary grows stronger in memory. With each return, the monument becomes older than the people standing inside it. A child who once watched from behind an adult's cloak grows into someone who brings their own child to the same ring. The circle begins to outlive individual experience. That is when a monument becomes more than construction. It becomes inheritance. The early builders may have celebrated the completion of the earthwork with feasting. Animals were slaughtered. Fires burned into evening. Meat was shared. Stories were told of the labor, the signs, the dead, and the purpose of the ring. People who had worked in different teams now saw the shape they had created together. The circle confirmed their unity. It also reminded them that unity required effort. There is a quiet force in this stage of Stonehenge because it reveals that greatness does not always begin with spectacle. It begins with a line in the earth. It begins with deciding that a place must be separated from the ordinary flow of life. It begins with gathering the dead, guiding the living, and making a boundary strong enough to hold memory. The first victory was not a conquest of enemies. It was a conquest of formlessness. The plain had been open. Now it contained a sacred center. The earth had been continuous. Now it had a marked threshold. The dead had been mourned. Now some of them were held within a design that could be revisited, renewed, and deepened. From chalk dust, antler scars, timber posts, and cremated bone, the people created the first enduring shape of Stonehenge. The stones that would later make the place famous were still only part of a possibility, but the essential transformation had already occurred. Human beings had taken a piece of open land and made it speak without words. Far to the west of Salisbury Plain, the land rises into a different mood. The air grows wetter, hills fold into one another beneath low clouds, streams run cold over stone. The Preseli Hills of southwest Wales stand with a quiet severity, their slopes changing color with weather, season, and distance. Here, among outcrops and ridges, were stones unlike the great pale sarsens of the chalklands. They were darker, denser, often blue-gray when freshly broken or wet with rain. To later eyes, they would become known as bluestones. Their journey is one of the most haunting mysteries of Stonehenge. These stones were not the largest pieces in the monument, yet their distance from the plain gives them extraordinary significance. They carried origin. They carried memory. To bring them eastward was to bind two landscapes together, one wet, rugged, and western, the other open, chalky, and wide beneath the sky. A stone from a distant hill is never only a stone. It is a piece of elsewhere made present. The people who selected these stones must have known the western land well, or known people who did. They may have understood particular outcrops as powerful places, connected to ancestors, healing, sound, water, or old ceremony. Some stones may already have stood in earlier settings before they were moved. Others may have been quarried with intention, detached from living rock by hammerstone, wedge, patience, and repeated blows. Each chosen stone began its ceremonial life before it ever reached the plain. Imagine workers at the foot of a Welsh outcrop in cold rain. The stone face is slick beneath their hands. Hammerstones strike along natural cracks. Wooden wedges are driven into openings, and soaked so they swell. People wait. Listen. Strike again. There is no explosion, no iron drill, no steel chain. The work depends on understanding weakness within strength. Rock that seems eternal may split if pressure is placed where the stone itself allows it. When a stone breaks free, the labor changes. It is no longer part of the hill. It becomes a responsibility. Ropes are fixed around it. Timber frames are prepared. The ground is cleared where possible. A group gathers, not only workers but watchers, singers, elders, and perhaps mourners of the place being taken apart. The first movement is often the most difficult. A stone released from its bed still resists travel. It must be tilted, dragged, braced, and guided down slopes where one mistake could shatter it or crush a body. The route from the Preseli Hills to Salisbury Plain was long enough to test every form of organization. Whether the stones were moved entirely by human effort, partly by water, or through a combination of land and river travel, the achievement remains immense. The journey was not a single straight line drawn across a map. It was a chain of decisions: which valley, which river, which season, which resting place, which community would help, and what would they receive in return. The stones may have moved slowly, in stages. A group hauls one down from the hills. Another helps bring it toward water. A third receives it farther along the route. Perhaps years passed between movements. Perhaps some stones waited beside rivers or settlements before continuing. The journey may have become ceremonial in itself, a traveling rite in which communities encountered the stones, fed the workers, touched the surfaces, and added their own memory to the long passage east. On land, movement required friction to be controlled but not forgotten. Sledges could be dragged over prepared tracks. Logs might be used as rollers in some conditions, though uneven ground would make them difficult. Wet clay, grass, timber rails, and careful pulling could help. Ropes made from plant fibers or hide had to be strong and constantly checked. Workers had to coordinate movement with chant, call, or drum-like rhythm. A stone moved not by one heroic pull, but by thousands of small victories. Downhill travel could be more frightening than uphill labor. A heavy stone wants to run when gravity takes it. Braking becomes as important as pulling. Ropes behind the stone must hold. Side teams must prevent turning. Wedges must be ready. Timber must be placed before the danger reaches it. A careless moment could turn sacred work into disaster. The journey required courage, but also restraint. Water offered promise and peril. Rivers can carry what land resists, but loading a stone onto a raft or boat is itself dangerous work. The craft must float under weight. It must remain balanced. It must survive currents, shallows, hidden snags, tides, and weather. A river journey may appear effortless from a distance, but to those guiding the load, every bend is a question. Will the current help or take control? Will the banks allow landing? Will the water fall too low? If the stones passed near the sea, the risk deepened. Coastal travel could shorten routes in some ways, but waves, tides, winds, and estuaries create their own uncertainty. The people of Neolithic Britain were capable of water travel, yet capability does not remove danger. A storm could scatter a convoy. A stone could be lost. A raft could overturn. The sea gives passage only on its own terms. And still the stones came. This persistence suggests that the destination mattered profoundly. No one moved such material across such distance for casual decoration. The blue stones must have held a value greater than convenience. Perhaps they were believed to heal. Perhaps they embodied ancestral territory. Perhaps they represented alliance between distant communities. Perhaps their movement proclaimed that the sacred center on the plain could gather powers from beyond its own horizon. In each possibility lies the same truth. Distance was part of meaning. When a stone travels, its story grows. People ask where it came from. They recall who helped move it. They remember the river where it nearly slipped, the hill where ropes broke, the feast where strangers became allies, the injury suffered by a worker, the child born during the journey, the elder who died before the stone arrived. By the time a blue stone reached Salisbury Plain, it may have carried more memory than any single person could hold. The stones themselves were modest compared with the later giants, but they were intimate. A person could stand close and see their different textures, colors, and shapes. Some were spotted, some darker, some with mineral flecks that caught light after rain. Wet bluestone can look alive in the gray weather, its surface deepening from dull to luminous. It would not be surprising if such material felt charged to those who handled it. Arrival on the plain must have been a moment of wonder. People who had never seen the western hills could touch them now. The distant landscape had entered their world. The stone might be lifted, set, rearranged, and set again, but its origin remained within it. The western rain, the quarry face, the mountain path, the river journey, the hands of many communities all became invisible layers inside the monument. This journey also reveals something essential about the builders. They did not choose only what was easiest. They chose what was meaningful. Modern minds often ask how ancient people moved stones without advanced machines. But an equally important question is why they were willing to try. The answer is not found in strength alone. It is found in shared belief strong enough to organize hardship. The bluestones made Stonehenge a meeting of landscapes. A circle on Salisbury Plain could now hold the memory of distant hills. The open chalkland could speak with the wet western mountains. A sacred place could become more powerful because it wasn't made from one region alone. It was assembled from journeys under a gray sky. As one of the transported stones was eased into position, the workers may have paused to run their hands over its surface. They may have remembered the miles. They may have spoken of those who began the journey but did not finish it. They may have felt that the stone had arrived not as an object, but as a traveler. In that sense, the bluestones were not silent. They carried the long road in their weight. Engineering without machines begins with the simplest question: how can a human body persuade a weight far greater than itself to move? The answer is not one invention. It is a chain of knowledge. Rope, wood, water, slope, leverage, friction, timing, food, leadership, and patience all become parts of the same tool. The builders did not need engines to think mechanically. They lived in a world where every heavy task taught the body how force behaves. A log dragged from woodland, a dead animal pulled from mud, a roof beam lifted into place, a stone axe polished for hours against grit. All offered lessons in pressure, balance, and resistance. A rope was technology. It had to be made before it could pull anything. Fibers from plants were stripped, dried, twisted, braided, and tested. Rawhide could be cut and worked. Animal sinew might strengthen smaller bindings. Each cord carried the labor of preparation. A weak rope could kill. A strong one could turn many separate bodies into one moving force. When 20, 40, or 100 people pulled together, the rope gathered their strength into a single line. Wood was technology, too. A straight trunk could become a lever. A branch could become a brace. A split plank could guide a sledge. A wedge could hold a dangerous weight in place for a few breaths longer. Timber did not merely support stone, it translated human effort into controlled movement. Without timber, the ground would grip too tightly, the stone would sink too deeply, and the builders would fight the earth with their bare strength alone. The sledge may have been one of the great silent helpers. Imagine a heavy stone lashed onto a wooden frame, its underside shaped or arranged to slide over prepared ground. The route ahead is cleared of loose obstacles. Grass may be wetted. Mud may be managed. Wooden rails may be laid in places where the soil is soft or uneven. Workers pull from the front, while others steady from the sides and rear. The stone does not rush. It creeps. Each short advance is a decision. The leader calls. The pull begins. Feet dig in. Bodies lean forward. The sledge groans. For a moment, nothing moves. Then friction gives way, and the stone shifts. The team must keep its rhythm, because a sudden lurch can twist the load or throw a worker beneath it. When the call comes to stop, wedges are driven in, ropes slacken carefully, and everyone breathes. The stone has traveled perhaps only a few feet, yet those few feet are progress. Levers made the impossible feel negotiable. A long timber placed beneath one edge of a stone allows a small lift where hands alone would fail. The principle is simple, but the practice is delicate. The lever must be strong enough not to snap. The fulcrum must be stable. The lifted weight must be caught before it falls back. A worker places a block beneath the raised edge. Another adjusts the angle. Many small lifts can change the position of a mass that no one could raise outright. This kind of engineering is not fast. It is cumulative. A stone is lifted a little, blocked, lifted again, shifted, braced, rested, then lifted again. The task may take hours or days. People must remain attentive even when exhausted, because the stone never forgives carelessness. Its weight is constant. Human focus is not. The true challenge is not only moving mass, but maintaining discipline long after excitement fades. Digging sockets required another intelligence. A standing stone needs a prepared hollow shaped to receive its base. The pit must be deep enough to hold, broad enough for maneuvering, and angled so the stone can be drawn upright. One side may be sloped like a ramp. The opposite side may be cut steeper, ready to catch the base. Chalk rubble, flint, and packed earth wait nearby to secure the stone once it stands. The hole is not merely absence, it is a trap designed for stability. Raising an upright began with positioning. The stone lies with its base near or within the socket. Ropes are fixed high on the shaft if possible, giving better pulling power. Timber frames, levers, and props surround the work area. Teams take positions. Some pull from ahead, some restrain from behind, some guide from the sides, others stand ready with wedges and packing stones. The entire event depends on sequence. Too soon, and the base may slip. Too late, and the stone may fall uncontrolled. As the stone rises, its balance changes. At first, the effort feels overwhelming, because much of the weight presses downward and backward. Then, as it reaches a steeper angle, the danger shifts. The stone may suddenly want to topple forward. What began as pulling becomes restraint. The workers must sense the crossing point between resistance and surrender. This is where experience matters more than bravery. Courage pulls hard. Knowledge knows when to hold back. The lintels, the horizontal stones resting above uprights, demanded still another achievement. To place one stone across two standing stones, the builders had to raise it high without cranes. Earthen ramps may have been used, built up gradually beside the uprights. Timber platforms, cribbing, levers, and repeated lifting could bring the lintel upward stage by stage. Soil and chalk might be piled to create a working height, then removed once the stone was settled. The monument would have looked unfinished, half buried in temporary architecture while the work continued. Then came the joints. This is one of the most remarkable details. The builders shaped the stones so that uprights and lintels fitted together with projections and hollows, like woodworking translated into stone. Tenons rose from the tops of uprights. Mortise holes were shaped beneath lintels. Some lintels were also joined end to end with tongue and groove shaping, helping the ring hold its form. These choices reveal minds familiar with carpentry, applying timber logic to massive stone. Stone dressing took patience almost beyond imagining. Hammerstones were used to peck, batter, smooth, and shape the surfaces. Each blow removed a small mark. Thousands of blows changed a rough block into a prepared monument stone. The work was noisy, repetitive, and physically demanding. Dust clung to skin, fingers bruised, arms ached. The builders were not simply dragging natural boulders into place. They were transforming them. Measurement did not require metal instruments. A cord can measure distance. A stake can fix a point. A sightline can align with a horizon. The human body itself can preserve proportion through repeated practice. A team that marks, checks, corrects, and checks again can achieve surprising precision. Stonehenge reminds us that accuracy is not born only from modern tools. It is born from attention. The greatest machine on the site was the organized crowd. Someone prepared food so workers had strength. Someone fetched water. Someone repaired ropes. Someone watched children away from danger. Someone managed animals. Someone shaped timber. Someone guided ritual observance so the work did not become merely practical. Engineering and society were inseparable. A lever can lift only if a community feeds the person holding it. There were failures. There must have been. A rope snapped, a sledge stuck, a stone cracked. Rain turned chalk slippery. A worker was injured. A command was misunderstood. Ancient engineering was learned through risk, correction, and memory. Each mistake became instruction. Each success became confidence. The builders did not possess modern technology, but they possessed accumulated knowledge tested under real danger. So the question changes, not how did they build without technology, but what kind of technology did they have? They had materials understood through touch. They had social systems able to gather labor. They had minds trained by landscape and craft. They had patience measured not in minutes, but seasons. They had mathematics without written numbers, architecture without blueprints, and mechanics without engines. Their tools were simple only if we look at them carelessly. On the plain, when a stone finally settled into place, the triumph belonged not to strength alone. It belonged to planning, rhythm, caution, and memory. It belonged to all the unseen work that happened before the pull began. The making of rope, the cutting of timber, the digging of sockets, the feeding of bodies, the trust between those who pulled and those who braced. A monument of stone was also a monument of coordination. That was their hidden technology. On the Marlborough Downs, north of the Sacred Plain, the sarsen stones lay scattered across the land like the broken bones of an older earth. They were not quarried from cliffs in neat blocks. They rested in fields, valleys, and ridges, hard masses of silkrete weathered by time, shaped by rain, frost, and the patient wearing of softer ground around them. To the people who found them, they must have seemed ancient beyond memory, too heavy for ordinary use, yet strangely suited to a work that asked for permanence. These were the giants. The blue stones carried distance and mystery, but the sarsens brought scale. Some weighed many tons. Some were taller than several people standing one above another. Their surfaces were rough, pitted, uneven, and stubborn. To choose one was to make a promise that would test an entire community. A small stone could be moved with difficulty. A sarsen demanded a campaign. The first task was selection. Not every great stone would do. The builders needed shape, size, soundness, and possibility. A stone too irregular might split during shaping. A stone too short could not stand with dignity. A stone too massive might defeat the root. A chosen sarsen had to be large enough for grandeur, yet not so impossible that effort became despair. Standing among many stones, the planners must have read them like living creatures, seeing future forms hidden inside rough bodies. Once chosen, the stone had to be freed from the ground around it. Soil was cleared, smaller stones were removed, ropes were fixed, timber was brought. The first movement may have been only a shudder, a grinding shift against earth that had held the stone for ages. Workers would have watched closely, listening for cracks, feeling the pull travel through rope and body. A stone that moved badly at the beginning could ruin months of preparation. The route southward was not an empty track waiting for them. It had to be imagined, negotiated, and made passable. Low places could mire a sledge. Steep slopes could become lethal. Water crossings demanded careful planning. The weight of the sarsens meant that every patch of soft ground became a problem. Teams may have laid timbers, cleared brush, repaired surfaces, and selected seasons when the earth would best support the burden. Even the weather became part of the engineering. A sarsen on a sledge is not merely heavy. It changes the behavior of everyone around it. People become quieter near it. Commands must be clear. Children are kept away. Dogs are driven back. Workers who pull must trust those who steer. Those who steer must trust those who brake. The stone moves forward with a sound that might be felt through the ground, a low scraping, groaning presence that turns travel into ceremony. The journey from the downs to the plain may have taken many stages. A few miles could be a major achievement. At a resting place, the ropes are loosened and inspected, fires are lit, hands are wrapped, blisters are opened or bandaged, food is brought to those too tired to rise. Someone sits with their back against the stone, feeling its coldness through clothing, perhaps wondering how long it will stand when all living bodies nearby are dust. When the sarsens arrived at the building ground, their second life began. They had to be shaped into forms unlike natural boulders. The uprights needed faces, edges, tops prepared for joints, and bases suited to sockets. The lintels needed curved and dressed surfaces, because the outer ring was not a rough pile of stones. It was designed to read as a continuous circle. Even with breaks now visible to modern eyes, the intended order was precise and deliberate. Hammerstones struck sarsen again and again. The work rang across the plain. Not the clean ring of metal, but a duller, harder percussion, stone against stone, repeated until roughness gave way to intention. Chips flew. Dust settled on skin and hair. A worker might spend days shaping one area no larger than a hand. The monument's grace was purchased through repetition almost impossible to count. The great trilithons gave the inner setting a more dramatic shape. Two uprights standing close together, one horizontal lintel resting across them, forming a stone doorway into sacred space. These pairs were not all equal. They rose in a graded arrangement, creating a sense of focus and hierarchy within the circle. The tallest stood as a commanding form, directing attention inward and upward. This was not random piling. It was architecture. To raise such uprights required prepared pits, powerful teams, and a choreography of risk. The base of each stone was guided into its socket. Ropes hauled the upper end higher. Timber props held each gained height. Levers adjusted small errors. Packing stones secured the base once upright. People watched from the edges, knowing that a single collapse could undo labor and take life. When a giant stood vertical, relief must have passed through the gathering like wind through grass, but setting the lintels above them was the bolder act. Earth may have been piled into ramps or timber structures built to support gradual lifting. The lintel was hauled upward inch by inch, perhaps along a slope of packed chalk, perhaps raised on platforms, perhaps maneuvered through a combination of methods. At every stage, the builders had to prevent sliding, twisting, and falling. The stone had to meet the tops of the uprights with enough accuracy for the joints to lock. Such work demanded not only muscle, but a calm understanding of weight in motion. Then, at last, stone met stone in the air. A tenon rose into a mortise. A lintel settled into place. The shape that had once existed only as thought became visible against the sky. For the people below, the effect must have been extraordinary. They had known stones lying on the ground. They had known earthworks and timber posts. But a horizontal stone lifted high between uprights created a new kind of space. It framed the heavens. It made an entrance where there was no wall. It gave the sky a threshold. The outer circle carried its own wonder. Uprights were set around the perimeter, their tops linked by lintels. The lintels were shaped to follow the curve, not merely placed as straight bars. Their ends were worked so they could join, creating the impression of a continuous ring above the living ground. The builders were not satisfied with standing stones alone. They wanted unity. A band of stone lifted around sacred space like a crown of the horizon. From a distance, the monument would have changed with light. In morning, the uprights cast long shadows over chalk and grass. At noon, the stones appeared heavier, their forms blunt beneath the high sun. In rain, their surfaces darkened. At sunset, the lintels cut dark shapes against a glowing sky. Birds may have perched on the high stones. Frost may have whitened their edges. The monument became a partner of weather. This great Sarsen moment transformed Stonehenge into something unmistakable. It was no longer only a marked place, a burial ground, or a sacred enclosure. It became an architecture of endurance. Its stones rose with a confidence rarely seen in prehistoric Britain. The work announced that human beings could take the hardest materials of their landscape and arrange them according to thought, ceremony, and shared will. The achievement was not perfect in the machine-made sense. The stones were irregular. The surfaces bore marks of handwork. The lines carried human correction rather than mechanical uniformity, but that is part of their power. The monument does not feel manufactured. It feels wrestled into being. Every curve and joint carries the trace of bodies, decisions, mistakes, and recoveries. Perhaps, when the largest trilithon stood complete, the people gathered in silence. No one living could have seen anything quite like it. The stones rose above them, massive yet balanced, heavy yet lifted into form. The crowd may have felt pride, fear, gratitude, and exhaustion mingled together. A human community had made a structure that seemed to borrow authority from the earth itself, and for a while, beneath that ring of stone and sky, the plain must have felt changed beyond return. The people who gathered at Stonehenge lived beneath a sky that was not distant from daily life. It governed warmth, cold, hunger, birth, travel, danger, and hope. The sun was not simply a bright object. It was the returning power that lengthened days, ripened grain, dried wet ground, and made shadows move across the plain. The moon was not simply a pale light at night. It changed shape, vanished, returned, and pulled the eye through darkness with a rhythm both familiar and mysterious. For people without written calendars, the heavens were read through attention. A sunrise in summer did not appear in the same place as a sunrise in winter. The sun traveled along the horizon across the year, slowly, faithfully, and then turned back. The moon followed its own more complicated path, swelling and thinning, rising at different times, sometimes high, sometimes low, sometimes absent when the night seemed deepest. To watch these patterns was not idle curiosity. It was survival, ceremony, and world-view. Stonehenge was shaped within this attentiveness. Its alignments toward solstice light suggest that people cared deeply about the turning points of the year. At midsummer, the sun rises toward the northeast. At midwinter, the sun sets toward the southwest. These were not ordinary days. They were thresholds, moments when the year seemed to pause and change direction. A community that gathered for such times could feel itself standing inside a cosmic rhythm, but the meaning of a solstice is never only astronomical. The longest day carries abundance, light, growth, and visibility. The shortest day carries darkness, cold, stored food, memory, and the need for renewal. In an agricultural and herding society, winter was a trial of preparation. Animals had to survive. People had to endure on what had been gathered. The return of light after the darkest season was not merely beautiful. It was reassurance that the world had not failed. Imagine a midwinter gathering. The air is sharp. Breath clouds before faces. Fires burn low against the cold. People arrive wrapped in skins and woven cloth, their feet wet from frost-softened ground. Animals are brought for feasting, perhaps because winter is a natural time to slaughter those that cannot be fed through the harder months. The smell of smoke, blood, meat, and damp wool hangs close to the earth. Above all this, the stones wait for the setting sun. As light lowers, the monument becomes a frame. The crowd watches not because they do not know what will happen, but because they do. Repetition gives power. The sun has reached its limit. The year has leaned toward darkness as far as it can. When light enters the sacred line, the watchers see more than sunlight on stone. They see order confirmed. They see that the world still keeps its promise. The dead may have been central to this experience. Cremated remains and burial traditions connect the monument to ancestry. To stand among stones during the turning of the year may have been to stand among those who had gone before, asking for continuity between generations. The dead were not merely past, they were part of the land, part of memory, part of obligation. Their presence could make a ceremony heavier, deeper, more binding. A person might enter the sacred space carrying grief, a father lost to sickness, a child who did not survive winter, an elder whose voice still seemed to echo near the hearth. In the ceremony, private sorrow could be gathered into communal order. The movement of the sun did not erase loss. It placed loss within a cycle. Darkness deepens, light returns, bodies die. Names continue for a time. Memory seeks a form. The stones may also have carried ideas of healing. Later traditions and archaeological interpretations have suggested that certain stones, especially those brought from distant Western places, may have been associated with special power. Whether this was healing of the body, healing of social wounds, or healing through contact with ancestral landscapes, the idea fits a world where material, place, and spirit were not separate categories. A stone from far away could be more than geological matter. It could be a vessel of force. Sacred places often work by concentrating contrasts. At Stonehenge, there was living and dead, near and distant, earth and sky, summer and winter, stone and flesh, permanence and decay. People came with bodies that tired, aged, bled, and died. The stones remained colder, slower, and harder. Yet even stone could fall, crack, be moved, or be reshaped. Nothing was absolutely eternal. But some things endured long enough to teach humility. Their myths are lost, but not the need for myth. Human beings make stories to connect what cannot be held together by practical explanation alone. Why does the sun turn back? Where do the dead go? Why do certain places feel powerful? Why must some acts be performed in the right sequence? Why do dreams carry messages? Why does a child resemble an ancestor? These questions ask for stories, and stories ask for settings in which they can be remembered. Stonehenge may have functioned as one such setting. The stones gave form to stories now vanished. A child standing beside an adult could hear why the sun mattered, why the dead were honored, why the stones stood where they did, why certain paths were walked in silence. The monument taught through scale. It told the young that their people belonged to something older and larger than one household. Education in this world was not separated into schools. It happened through work, imitation, ceremony, correction, and story. A young person learned the proper way to approach a sacred boundary by walking with elders. They learned which stones could be touched and which could not. They learned when to speak, when to sing, when to remain still. Knowledge entered the body through repetition. Culture lived in posture as much as speech. Social roles shape these ceremonies. Some people may have stood closer to the center. Others watched from beyond the main stones. Some handled remains. Some prepared fires. Some distributed food. Some interpreted signs. Gender, age, lineage, skill, and status likely influenced who did what. A society can speak its hierarchy through placement. Where a person stands may reveal who they are allowed to be, yet ceremonies could also create unity. When many people watch the same sunset, eat from the same slaughtered animals, hear the same chants, and move through the same sacred landscape, difference is folded into shared experience. For a while, disputes soften. Kin groups see themselves as part of a wider whole. The cosmos becomes a witness to social order. The stones do not merely mark belief, they help make community real. There may have been music, bone flutes, rattles, drums made from hide, clapping hands, stamping feet, and the human voice could fill the air. Sound behaves differently around stone. It reflects, gathers, fades, and returns. A chant inside the monument might feel larger than the number of singers. At night, rhythm could carry beyond the circle into darkness, calling listeners toward the center or warning them of sacred distance. Fire would transform the place again. By daylight, stone belongs to the horizon. By firelight, it becomes alive with movement. Flames make surfaces flicker. Shadows lean and withdraw. Faces appear and vanish. Smoke climbs between uprights and disappears into stars. The monument could feel like a place between worlds, not because of fantasy, but because architecture, darkness, sound, grief, and expectation alter human perception. Their universe was probably not divided into the modern categories of science, religion, and art. The sky could be observed accurately and revered deeply at the same time. A stone could be measured and sacred. A burial could be emotional, political, and cosmic. A feast could feed bodies while renewing alliances and honoring unseen powers. The builders did not need to choose between practical knowledge and spiritual meaning. They lived where the two were woven together. At the heart of this worldview was return. The sun returns, the seasons return, herds return to grazing, people return to sacred places, stories return to the lips of elders. The dead return in memory, in names, perhaps in the land itself. Stonehenge gave return a form large enough to be seen. Its circle held movement without ending, direction without simple straightness, order without writing. Under the open sky, a person could stand among the stones and feel the year turning around them. The horizon, the dead, the living crowd, the cold stone, the fading light, and the coming dark all belonged to one experience. It was not an explanation carved in words. It was a way of feeling the universe, and in that feeling, the monument found its deepest voice, at its greatest strength. Stonehenge was not standing alone. It was the heart of a wide ceremonial landscape, a place whose influence spread across the chalklands through paths, settlements, monuments, burials, and memory. The stones were the most visible sign of power, but they were not the whole system. Around them, the plain held many other marks of human intention, some low and earthen, some vanished into soil, some once built in timber and now remembered only through traces beneath the grass. This was a world organized by movement. People did not merely arrive at the monument and stop. They approached through a landscape already arranged to shape experience. The land contained avenues, river routes, timber circles, burial mounds, and gathering places. A person traveling toward the stones may have passed older earthworks, crossed open downland, followed the curve of the river Avon, or moved along a ceremonial route that made the journey feel purposeful long before the destination appeared. The monument began working on the mind before it came fully into view. Nearby, large timber structures and settlement areas suggest a seasonally crowded world. Houses may have stood in clusters, their walls made from posts, wattle, and daub, their interiors warmed by central hearths. These were not grand palaces, but their number matters. They indicate gatherings on a scale far beyond one household or one small hamlet. At certain times, the plain may have filled with people, animals, smoke, noise, and expectation. In such moments, Stonehenge's power was not silent. It was social. Imagine a winter gathering when people arrive from many directions. The paths become worn with feet and hooves. Pigs squeal in temporary pens, cattle low in the cold air. Smoke hangs low above house roofs and open fires. The smell of roasting meat carries across the settlement. Visitors meet kin they have not seen for months. Strangers become guests, rivals, marriage partners, witnesses, or allies. Children run between shelters, learning the wider world through faces and accents not heard at home. At the center of this activity lies a hierarchy of places. Some ground is for sleeping, some for cooking, some for slaughter, some for public gathering, some for burial, some for ceremony. The landscape is divided not by fences alone, but by meaning. A person knows when they are in ordinary space and when they are nearing sacred space. Their behavior changes, their voice lowers, their steps become measured. Power lies in making everyone feel the difference. The monument's strongest age may have been one of confidence. Its stones stood high, its ceremonies drew crowds, its connections reached across regions, its builders and keepers had succeeded in making a place that could command labor, attention, and return. A society that can build such a monument has already solved many difficult problems. It can feed large groups. It can maintain shared belief. It can coordinate specialists. It can preserve tradition while adapting older forms into new ones. Yet confidence does not mean simplicity. The height of power is often the moment when a system looks most complete and most fragile at once. The more people involved, the more relationships must be managed. The more sacred a place becomes, the greater the risk of dispute over who controls it. The more wealth gathered in feasts and ceremonies, the more visible inequality becomes. Beneath the appearance of unity, many ambitions may be moving quietly. Stonehenge's reach may have depended on its ability to absorb difference. People from separate communities could come to the same plain, share ceremonies, and return home with renewed connections. The monument offered a common focus without requiring every group to become identical. One family might emphasize ancestors, another might seek healing, another might come for marriage alliances, another might come because obligation demanded it. The same stones could hold many meanings at once. This flexibility made the place powerful. A monument that means only one thing can fail when that one meaning changes. A monument that gathers many needs can endure longer. Stonehenge may have been burial ground, ceremonial center, astronomical marker, ancestral shrine, healing place, political stage, and meeting ground all at the same time. Its strength lay in the way these roles overlapped. No single explanation exhausts it, because no living society is built from a single need. The surrounding burial mounds added another layer of authority. Across the plain, the dead were marked in the land, some with impressive barrows rising above the grass. A mound changes the horizon. It says that a person, family, or lineage deserves lasting attention. When many such mounds gather near a sacred center, the landscape becomes a map of memory and status. The dead do not simply rest. They participate in the ordering of the living. To walk among these mounds was to walk through claims. Here lies someone remembered. Here a lineage displays itself. Here a ceremony once gathered mourners. Here wealth may have been placed with a body. Even if names faded, the forms remained. Stonehenge stood among these markers like a central fire among smaller flames, not replacing them, but giving them a larger field of meaning. The river Avon deepened this world of connection. Water moved where stone stood still. A river carries reflections, sound, silt, offerings, and bodies of memory. Processions may have moved between water and stone, between timber settings and stone settings, between places associated with the living and places associated with the dead. A journey from riverbank to monument could symbolize passage, cleansing, arrival, or transformation. The exact words are gone, but the spatial drama remains. At maximum power, Stonehenge may have shaped time as much as place. Seasonal gatherings gave the year a ceremonial structure. People could anticipate them, prepare for them, measure obligations by them. Animals were raised with future feasts in mind. Marriages may have been arranged around gatherings. Disputes may have been settled before witnesses. Stories may have been retold when communities assembled. The monument became a calendar not only of the sun, but of society. Economic life moved through this ceremonial rhythm. Feasts required animals, grain, tools, vessels, fuel, labor, and transport. Preparing for a gathering could occupy households long in advance. A pig fattened months earlier might be driven to the plain for slaughter. Grain saved carefully might be ground for communal meals. Objects could be exchanged as gifts, offerings, or signs of alliance. The sacred center drew material life into its orbit. The keepers of the monument, whoever they were, must have held significant influence. To control timing was to control attention. To define correct ceremony was to define legitimacy. To decide who entered sacred areas, whose dead could be honored, and how offerings were handled was to shape social reality. This power may not have looked like a throne, but it could affect marriages, alliances, prestige, and memory. Quiet authority can be stronger than visible command. Still, Stonehenge did not dominate by walls or weapons alone. Its influence depended on return. People had to keep coming back. They had to believe the journey mattered. They had to feel that the ceremonies renewed something essential. A sacred center is strongest when absence makes people long for it, and arrival confirms why they came. The monument lived in the minds of those far beyond sight of its stones. Picture the plain during a great gathering at dusk. Fires burn in many places. Smoke drifts across low ground. The stones rise dark against a fading sky. Near the settlements, laughter and argument mingle with the sounds of animals. Closer to the sacred center, movement slows. Figures pass between uprights. A chant begins, soft at first, then steadier. The setting sun colors the lintels and leaves the spaces beneath them in shadow. For those present, the monument may have seemed immovable but inevitable, almost beyond human origin. Children who had never seen the building work could imagine the stones had always stood. Elders could point to them as proof that the people were strong, favored, remembered, and bound together. The structure transformed past labor into present authority. That is one of the secrets of monumentality. What was once difficult become odd in time. Unquestioned, and yet, even at its height, hidden weakness lay within its strength. The stones required belief to remain central. The ceremonies required agreement. The gatherings required food. The roots required safety. The social order required people to accept obligations year after year. If any of these threads frayed, the great center could still stand physically while its meaning began to change. Stone does not guarantee permanence of purpose. It only gives purpose a longer shadow. At maximum power, Stonehenge was a circle of stone, a theater of sky, a field of ancestors, a meeting ground of distant communities, and a stage on which society saw itself made whole. It gathered the living and the dead, the near and the far, the practical and the sacred. Its reach was measured not only by miles, but by the number of lives drawn into its rhythm. For a while the world seemed centered there. The plain held its crowds, the stones held the sky, and the people, looking up from firelight and shadow, could believe that their order would endure. Beneath the surface of sacred order, every great monument carries a cost. Stonehenge stood in strength, but strength demanded constant renewal. Gatherings had to be organized, food had to be supplied, paths had to remain known, ceremonies had to be remembered correctly. The stones could stand through wind and rain, but the society around them was made of living people, and living people grow tired. The first weakness may have been simple exhaustion. To build and maintain a place of such importance required labor taken from other needs. A day spent hauling timber is a day not spent tending a field. A season of ceremonial preparation is a season of stored food consumed by guests, workers, and animals. A family proud to contribute once may feel burdened when asked again. The same obligation that once felt honorable can become heavy when harvests are poor, children are hungry, or herds are thin after disease. No monument feeds itself. The sacred center depended on households scattered across the wider landscape. They produced grain, raised animals, made tools, and sent people to work or attend ceremonies. If life was generous, the burden could be carried with pride. But when weather turned against crops, when animals weakened, when winter lasted too long, contribution became harder. A ritual feast might still be expected, even when the village providing animals could barely spare them. In that tension, resentment could begin quietly. Inequality may also have deepened. The more important a place became, the more valuable it was to control access to it. Some families may have claimed special rights near the stones. Some lineages may have presented themselves as closer to the ancestors. Some ritual specialists may have guarded knowledge as inheritance. A sacred center can unite, but it can also create ranks. Those allowed to stand nearer the center are seen. Those kept farther away remember the distance. Such distinctions may not have seemed unjust at first. They could be explained through tradition, ancestry, service, or sacred law. Yet over time, the explanation itself might become a chain. A young person from a lesser family might wonder why another receives honor for a birthright. A skilled worker might see leaders praised while his own hands remain scarred and unnamed. A household might provide food, but receive little influence. Quiet comparisons can erode old trust. Succession was another danger. In a world without written offices and formal titles, authority had to pass through memory, custom, and acceptance. A respected elder dies. A ritual expert grows weak. A planner's child claims the same role, but lacks the same calm judgment. Two families disagree over who should lead the next ceremony. What had once been settled by personality becomes uncertain. The dead cannot easily mediate among the living. A succession dispute need not become open violence to damage a system. It can appear as delay, refusal, absence, or competing ceremonies. One group arrives at the sacred place while another stays away. One lineage performs a rite at a different time. One leader's instructions are obeyed slowly, with muttered doubts. An old chant is altered. A burial is contested. The stones remain unchanged, but the human agreement around them begins to loosen. There may also have been strain between old forms and new desires. Younger generations inherit monuments they did not choose to build. They may respect them, fear them, or feel trapped by them. To an elder, the stones are proof of ancestral greatness. To a young herder, they may also represent demands, rules, and long ceremonies in cold weather. Reverence can survive alongside impatience. A society changes first in the private thoughts of those who still outwardly obey. The maintenance of meaning is harder than the maintenance of stone. A fallen timber can be replaced. A ditch can be cleared. A path can be walked again. But belief must be renewed inside each generation. The story of why a stone matters must be told convincingly to children who did not see it raised. The grief of ancestors must be made present to people who never heard their voices. The alignment of sun and stone must continue to feel sacred, not merely familiar. Habit protects tradition, but habit can also empty it. Economic strain could deepen the cracks. Herds might become signs of wealth, and wealth might cluster around certain households. Some people could host larger feasts, give more generous gifts, and secure more marriages. Others might fall into dependence. Debt does not need written contracts to be real. A family that receives animals in a hard year may owe labor later. A household that cannot contribute may lose standing. In such ways, generosity and control can wear the same face. Court intrigue, if we may use the phrase carefully for a society without courts, could exist around influential hearths and ritual gatherings. Alliances formed through marriage, feasting, gift exchange, and shared ancestors. Promises were made beside fires. Grievances were remembered through seasons. A leader might favor one kin group in the distribution of meat. A ritual specialist might endorse one claimant over another. A builder might withhold knowledge from rivals. Power moved through whispers as much as commands. Overexpansion may have been less about territory and more about expectation. A sacred center that draws too many obligations can become difficult to sustain. More visitors require more food. More ceremonies require more coordination. More claims require more negotiation. More prestige invites more competition. The system that once gave strength by connecting many communities could become strained by the very number of threads tied to it. There's also the quiet pressure of time. Stone changes slowly, but social memory changes faster. The first builders may be remembered as near ancestors, then remote ancestors, then figures almost mythic. Details blur. Original reasons are reinterpreted. A stone once raised for a specific rite may gain a broader meaning. A burial once tied to a known person becomes an ancestral presence without a name. This is not failure. It is how culture lives. Yet with each transformation, older certainty fades. In the landscape, signs of strain might appear subtly. A ceremony draws fewer people from one direction. A path becomes less worn. A repair is delayed. Offerings change in character. Burials shift away from older patterns. Feasting remains abundant for a while, but the meaning of the feast alters. Archaeology often sees the result, not the argument. It finds traces of change, and must imagine the voices that produce them. Some people may have defended the old order fiercely. Elders speak longer at gatherings. Ritual specialists insist that every gesture be preserved. Influential families remind others of obligations owed to the dead. They point to the stones and say, "This is who we are." Their concern is not merely conservative stubbornness. They understand that shared memory holds society together. If the center fails, relationships may scatter. Others may have sought adaptation. They do not reject the sacred place, but they want new forms, new rites, new symbols of rank, new ways to honor the dead, new materials, new connections. For them, change is not betrayal, it is life continuing. A society divided between preservation and transformation can appear peaceful for a long time, because both sides still use the same sacred language. Only slowly does the difference become visible. The deepest weakness at Stonehenge may have been this: the monument was built to endure, but the world around it was not fixed. Crops changed, herding patterns changed, families rose and faded. Contacts with distant regions shifted, beliefs grew, blended, and thinned. What once gathered everyone into one rhythm could gradually become one important place among many, then one ancient place within a changing landscape. The stones did not need to fall for decline to begin. A monument can lose central power while still standing beautifully under the sun. People may still visit, still remember, still perform rites, but with different urgency. The old center becomes venerable rather than commanding. It is respected, perhaps feared, perhaps loved, but no longer able to hold every thread of society in its grasp. In the calm of the plain, this weakening would not sound like collapse. It would sound like fewer voices at a gathering. It would look like grass returning to a neglected track. It would feel like a story told with less certainty beside the fire. The stones remained. The human order around them began to shift. Pressure came to Salisbury Plain from many directions, not as one sudden storm, but as a changing weather of people, objects, customs, and fears. The old sacred order did not stand in a sealed world. Beyond the chalk ridges, new contacts were widening across rivers, coasts, and sea routes. Materials and ideas were moving with growing force. What arrived was not only trade, it was a new way of measuring power. Metal began to change the imagination. At first, copper and gold were rare and wondrous. They did not replace stone tools immediately, and they did not transform every household in a single generation. But their appearance mattered. A bright object catches the eye differently from flint, bone, or polished stone. Gold gleams with a light that seems almost captured from the sun. Copper can be shaped, repaired, and displayed. These materials were not merely useful, they were persuasive. A person wearing a shining ornament did not look like everyone else. A leader who could give metal as a gift commanded attention. A traveler carrying a small blade, a golden bead, or a decorated object from far away brought proof that wider worlds existed beyond the old ceremonial roots. Prestige began to gather around new things, and new things often disturb old centers of meaning. The arrival of metal was tied to movement across Europe. People crossed seas, followed trade paths, and formed relationships linking Britain to distant regions. Along with objects came styles of burial, new drinking vessels, new forms of display, and perhaps new languages or dialects. These movements were not always invasions in the dramatic sense. Some came through marriage, some through exchange, some through small groups settling among older communities. Yet over time, the effect could be profound. The dead began to be honored in changing ways. Individual burials gained importance. A person might be placed beneath a round mound with distinctive goods, pottery, ornaments, tools, or weapons. The emphasis shifted toward the identity and status of a single body, rather than only the collective memory of ancestors. This does not mean older beliefs vanished at once. Ancient customs often survive beside new ones, but the balance changed. Prestige could now be buried with one person in a way that everyone could see. Barrows spread across the landscape like new statements written in earth. Each mound rose over a particular burial, marking a name now lost, a family now vanished, a claim once meaningful. These mounds did not ignore the old sacred places. Many gathered near them, as if later people still wanted closeness to ancient authority. Yet their message was different. The circle belonged to communal memory. The barrow proclaimed individual presence. This was a quiet rebellion against the older order, not rebellion with burning walls and shouted armies, perhaps, but rebellion through emphasis. If power once flowed through shared ritual, ancestral gathering, and seasonal return, it now increasingly shone from personal wealth, inherited rank, and control of exotic materials. A leader no longer needed only the old sacred center to display authority. A burial mound, a metal object, a warrior image, or a distant alliance could speak loudly in the landscape. External pressure also came through the sea. Britain was an island, but the sea was not a wall. It was a road for those who knew how to use it. Boats crossed dangerous waters carrying people, animals, goods, and stories. Coastal communities heard news first. Inland communities received objects already charged with distance. With every exchange, the mental map of the world widened. A society that once focused its greatest attention on one ceremonial landscape now faced many competing horizons. Climate and environment may have added strain. A sequence of difficult seasons can weaken confidence in old rites. If ceremonies meant to renew the world are followed by poor harvests, disease among animals, or hunger, people may begin to doubt those who conduct them. They may not abandon belief altogether. More often, they seek other powers, a new charm, a new burial rite, a new alliance, a new material shining in the hand. Conflict may have become sharper as wealth became more portable and visible. Herds could be stolen. Metal objects could be taken. Prestige goods could provoke envy. Land suitable for grazing or farming could be disputed. A society with rising inequality often produces both admiration and resentment. The strong household draws followers, but also enemies. The wealthy burial impresses the living, but also reminds them who had more. Rival powers did not need to be kingdoms to matter. A strong lineage in one valley, a rising group near a river crossing, a coastal community enriched by trade, or a family controlling access to prized materials could challenge older authorities. Their influence might spread through marriages, feasts, gifts, intimidation, or ritual competition. Power was becoming more mobile. It could travel with a person, an object, or a story. At the edge of a gathering, one can imagine two visions of authority facing each other. An elder points toward ancient stones and speaks of ancestors, seasons, and obligations older than any living body. A younger leader stands nearby, with a metal ornament catching firelight on the chest, surrounded by followers, impressed by distant contacts. Neither figure must openly insult the other. The tension is enough. Which power will people follow when fear comes, or hunger, or opportunity? The answer may have varied from community to community. Some continued to honor the old center. Some added new meanings to it. Some used its prestige to support newer forms of rank. Others may have turned attention elsewhere, toward barrows, metal exchange networks, and personal claims of status. Cultural change is rarely a clean replacement. It is more like many fires burning across a dark field, some fading, some newly lit, some sharing sparks with others. The sacred landscape adapted, but adaptation has limits. A place designed for one kind of social rhythm cannot always command another. If people increasingly measured importance through individual burial, personal treasure, and long-distance exchange, then the older communal circle had to compete with new displays of power. Its stones still stood, but their authority was no longer the only language spoken on the plain. Even external influence could be welcomed at first. A new vessel's shape might appear at a feast. A new ornament might be admired. A new burial custom might be tried for someone of special standing. But each adoption changes what feels normal. The extraordinary becomes desirable. The desirable becomes expected. The expected becomes a measure of rank. In this way, a society can be transformed by objects small enough to hold in one hand. There may have been resistance. Some people may have viewed new customs as dangerous, improper, or disrespectful to the dead. Others may have embraced them as signs of vitality. The argument may have unfolded in choices rather than speeches. Where to bury a body, what to place beside it, which gathering to attend, which marriage to approve, which ornament to display, which old rite to shorten, alter or omit, outside threats, internal rivalries, changing wealth, new burial customs, long-distance contact, and environmental uncertainty, all pressed upon the world of the stones. No single cause explains the shift. History seldom moves with only one hand. It pulls from many sides at once, until what seemed stable begins to loosen. On Salisbury Plain, the change may have felt gradual enough to deny. The stones still caught the sun. The old paths still existed. Stories were still told. But the meaning of power was moving. It was entering metal, mounds, weapons, ornaments, and individual graves. It was traveling by sea and river. It was shining at the throat of a new elite. The ancient circle remained under the sky. Around it, the world learned new ways to remember, compete, and command. The fall of Stonehenge was not a single crash heard across the plain. It was quieter than that. It was slower. The stones did not all tumble in one night. No final king closed its gate. No last priest carved a farewell into the lintels. Instead, the world that had once gathered around the monument changed its rhythm, and the great circle gradually became something different from what its builders had known. Some ceremonies may have continued. People do not abandon sacred places easily. A monument with so much age and presence would still draw respect, fear, memory, and curiosity. Families may have come to the stones long after the first meanings had shifted. Travelers may have paused there at sunrise. Children may have been warned not to play too near certain places. Offerings may have been left in ways that leave little trace. Silence does not always mean emptiness, but central power faded. The great gatherings that once made the plain pulse with life became less frequent, or smaller, or changed in purpose. The old alignments remained, but the communities watching them were no longer the same. The dead were honored in new forms. Wealth moved along new networks. Metal altered status. Individual mounds rose across the landscape. The stones still stood, but society no longer needed them in quite the same way. Their authority became ancient rather than immediate. There is a special melancholy in that kind of survival. A place remains visible while its original language disappears. People may still know that it matters, but not all know why. A story becomes shorter each time it is told. A name is forgotten, then replaced by another. A ritual gesture survives after its explanation has faded. The monument enters a new life as memory without full translation. Weather continued its patient work. Rain ran down the stones. Frost entered cracks. Lichens spread across surfaces in pale green and orange patches. Birds nested or rested on high edges. Grass grew over old scars in the chalk. Ditches softened. Banks lowered. Timber structures vanished entirely, leaving only stains in the earth for distant investigators to find. The landscape healed its wounds, but it did not erase them completely. Some stones fell, some leaned, some broke. The fall of a great upright must have been a powerful event whenever it happened. Perhaps people heard the impact from a distance, a heavy sound traveling through the ground. Perhaps it happened in a storm, when wind roared over the plain and rain blurred the horizon. Perhaps no one was there to see it. A stone that had stood for centuries lay suddenly horizontal, returning to the posture from which human effort had once raised it. Even fallen, it remained charged. Later, peoples looked at the monument through their own worlds. Bronze Age communities buried their important dead nearby. Drawing prestige from proximity to the older stones, Iron Age people may have known it as an ancient place already beyond explanation. When Rome eventually reached Britain, the stones were older to Roman soldiers than the Roman Empire is to us. Imagine a traveler in a cloak standing near the circle, seeing not a construction site or active ceremonial machine, but a wonder from an unfathomable past. Centuries passed. Languages changed over the plain. Gods changed. Kingdoms rose and fell. Fields were marked. Roads crossed the countryside, and stories gathered around the stones like mist. In later imagination, Stonehenge became the work of giants, magicians, devils, ancient sages, or heroic kings. Such legends were not archaeological truth, but they reveal something important. When people encounter a monument whose builders are forgotten, they do not leave it blank. They fill the silence with beings large enough to explain the labor. The stones became a mirror for each age. Medieval storytellers saw wonder and enchantment. Early antiquarians measured, guessed, argued, and drew. Some imagined druids, although the main monument was already ancient, long before the historical druids known from classical sources. Visitors chipped pieces away as souvenirs. Farmers worked nearby. Scholars debated alignments, origins, and dates. The stones endured admiration and damage together, as famous ruins often do. Then came excavation. The ground began to yield its hidden record. Archaeologists studied ditches, pits, cremations, tool marks, stone holes, animal bones, pottery, and surrounding monuments. What legend had made magical Careful investigation made human again, not less wondrous, more wondrous. The achievement did not require giants. It required organized communities, skilled hands, deep belief, and generations of effort. The builders returned, not by name, but through evidence. Each discovery changed the silence slightly. A cremation burial revealed grief and ritual. An antler pick showed labor. A shaped stone joint revealed technical imagination. The distant origin of blue stones widened the map. The Sarsens spoke of local strength and selection. Nearby settlements suggested feasts, gatherings, and seasonal crowds. The monument was no longer a lonely puzzle. It became part of a living prehistoric world, and yet the mystery remained. Archaeology can show where a post stood, but not the exact words spoken beside it. It can identify burned bone, but not the face remembered by mourners. It can map an avenue, but not the feeling of walking it at dusk. It can measure solstice alignment, but not the song carried by the crowd as light touched stone. The closer we come to the builders, the more clearly we see both their humanity and their distance. The distance is part of the monument's power. Stonehenge is not a solved machine with one simple answer. It is a layered place, made by people whose lives were as complex as ours, though shaped by different materials, fears, and hopes. They did not have modern technology, but they had knowledge. They did not write their explanation, but they wrote with earth and stone. They did not preserve their names, but they left a structure that keeps inviting the living to ask better questions. Today the plain is changed again. Roads lie nearby. Visitors walk along managed paths. The stones are protected, studied, photographed, and watched by people from across the world. The modern eye sees them through cameras, books, diagrams, and scientific reports. Yet at certain moments, especially in low light, the distance between ages can feel strangely thin. A winter sun lowers behind the stones. Wind moves through the grass. The great uprights darken. For a moment, the monument is not a tourist site, not a diagram, not a famous image on a screen. It is once more a ring of human intention beneath an enormous sky. The old questions return softly. Who stood here? What did they believe? Whose ashes rested near this ground? What songs were lost? What promises were made and broken? What did they hope would last? Stonehenge answers without speaking. It tells us that human beings have always reached beyond the necessary. We have always made places for memory, fear, grief, wonder, and the sky. We have always gathered around difficult tasks when the meaning seemed large enough. We have always tried to place something lasting between ourselves and time. The builders are gone. Their houses have vanished. Their language is lost. Their bodies returned to earth, ash and bone long ago. But the work of their hands still interrupts the horizon. It still slows the footsteps of strangers. It still makes people look upward. In that quiet pause, across thousands of years, the builders have not entirely disappeared. They remain in the stones. They remain in the questions. They remain in the silence that follows wonder. And as evening settles over Salisbury Plain, the monument grows darker against the fading sky. The wind continues. The grass bends and rises. Shadows gather in the spaces between the stones. Time moves on, as it always has, but something human lingers there, patient and unfinished, waiting beneath the stars. As the last light fades over Salisbury Plain, the stones settle back into silence. The crowds are gone now. The fires are gone. The voices that once moved through the cold air have thinned into memory. Only the wind remains, passing softly through the grass, touching the old stones, and moving on into the dark. For thousands of years the circle has watched the sky change, summer light, winter frost, morning mist, evening rain. Generations have come and gone beneath it. Names have disappeared, stories have broken apart, but the stones still hold their quiet place between earth and heaven. And perhaps that is enough. Not every mystery needs to be fully solved before it can be felt. Not every silence is empty. Sometimes silence is the shape memory takes when words have vanished. So we leave Stonehenge beneath the stars. The plain grows still, the horizon darkens, and somewhere in that deep, ancient quiet, the work of human hands continues to speak, softly, without a voice.